I'm Megan Taylor, 26 years old, and I woke up to the rhythmic beeping of machines I didn't recognize. White walls, antiseptic smell, needle in my arm hospital. Flashes came back, the presentation, my vision tunneling, knees buckling beneath me as my colleagues' faces blurred. Someone called my name as the floor rushed up to meet me. The doctor said I had suffered a severe panic attack combined with exhaustion. They'd called my emergency contacts, my parents, but when the door opened, it wasn't them. It was my sister Brooke, whom I hadn't seen in 8 years. "They're not coming, Meg," she said softly. "They never planned to." Before I dive deeper into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories about family dynamics that aren't always what they seem. Now, let me tell you how my perfect family image shattered overnight. Growing up in our pristine colonial home in suburban Boston, everyone thought the Taylors had it all. My parents, Jessica and Richard, were pillars of the community. Dad, a successful investment banker. Mom, the head of the local charity board. From the outside, we were picture perfect, but inside those walls, a different story unfolded. From our earliest years, the roles were clearly defined. I was Megan, the good daughter, straight-A student, captain of the debate team, prom committee, and volunteer at the local animal shelter. My achievements were displayed prominently on the living room walls and mentioned at every dinner party. "Our Megan is applying to Princeton," Mom would announce, her arm draped possessively over my shoulders. Then there was Brooke, 2 years younger and seemingly born to challenge our parents' carefully constructed image. Where I was compliant, Brooke questioned everything. Where I followed rules, she tested boundaries. Her intelligence matched mine, maybe even exceeded it. But she refused to channel it in ways our parents approved of. "Why would I join debate club when the school newspaper actually makes a difference?" she'd argue. "Why should I care about getting into an Ivy League when half those graduates end up miserable?" Our parents' responses were always the same. "Don't be difficult, Brooke. Why can't you be more like your sister? This attitude will get you nowhere in life." As children, Brooke and I had been close despite our differences. We'd build elaborate blanket forts in the basement, away from our parents' watchful eyes. There, Brooke would show me her secret writings, poems, and short stories that revealed a depth I envied. We'd pinky swear not to tell Mom and Dad about these hideaways. Our first conspiracy against the suffocating perfection demanded of us. But as we entered high school, the gap between us widened. Each achievement of mine became another weight on Brooke's shoulders. Each of her rebellions, dyeing her hair blue, staying out past curfew, befriending the wrong crowd, became another reason for our parents to hold me up as the golden standard. "I can't breathe in this house anymore," Brooke confided one night when she was 16. "They don't see me, Meg. They see a problem to fix." I should have defended her. I should have told our parents that their constant comparisons were destroying my sister. But I didn't. The praise and approval I received had become a drug I couldn't give up, even as I watched it poison my relationship with Brooke. The breaking point came the day after Brooke's high school graduation. She'd managed to graduate with honors despite her rebellions, but our parents' celebration dinner focused more on my upcoming senior year of college than her accomplishment. "I'm leaving," she announced at the dinner table, setting down her fork with quiet determination. "I've saved enough from my job. I'm moving to New York." "Don't be ridiculous," Dad dismissed her without looking up from his plate. "You're going to state in the fall. We've already paid the deposit." "I'm 18, Brooke replied. "You can't stop me." What followed was the ugliest fight I'd ever witnessed in our household. Words like ungrateful, disappointment, and waste of potential were hurled at Brooke. When she looked at me a silent plea for support, I lowered my eyes to my plate. She was gone the next morning before sunrise. No note, no goodbye. Just the echo of words I'd failed to say in her defense. After that, my parents systematically erased Brooke from our daily life. Her photographs disappeared from the walls. Her bedroom was converted into a home office within months. Her name became taboo, mentioned only in hushed tones when absolutely necessary. "It's better this way," Mom assured me when she caught me looking at an old family photo that still contained Brooke. "Some people just aren't meant for family life." I nodded and accepted this narrative because it was easier than confronting the truth. I stayed at a college close to home, accepted a job at my father's friend's marketing firm after graduation, and spent 5 years trying to be perfect enough to fill the void Brooke had left. But perfection extracts its price. 60-hour work weeks, constant anxiety about disappointing my parents, dating men they approved of rather than anyone who actually interested me, living in an apartment they helped choose and partially paid for. The weight of being the only child, the successful one, the one who stayed, grew heavier each year until it finally crushed me that day on the office floor. "Why are you here?" I asked Brooke now, my voice hoarse from the hospital oxygen. After 8 years of silence, why show up now? Brooke looked different, more confident, with subtle streaks of purple in her dark hair instead of the rebellious blue of her teenage years. She wore a simple black blazer over a vintage band t-shirt, a professional casual blend that suggested she'd found her own path. "Grandma Elaine has been keeping tabs on both of us," she said, settling into the chair beside my hospital bed. "She's been my lifeline since I left." "Grandma?" I was genuinely confused. Our maternal grandmother lived in Maine, and we rarely saw her growing up. Mom always claimed they weren't close, that Grandma Elaine was difficult, a word I now recognized as code for anyone who challenged my parents' authority. "Yeah, she reached out to me about a month after I left. Found me through a mutual friend of Mom's who secretly disagreed with how they treated me." Brooke pulled out her phone, scrolling through something. "She's been my real family all these years. She's been asking about you, too." The revelation that Grandma had maintained contact with Brooke and wanted to know about me was disorienting enough. But what Brooke said next shattered my carefully constructed reality entirely. "The hospital called me because I'm still listed as your secondary emergency contact. Apparently, you never removed me after I left." Her eyes softened slightly. "But they called Mom and Dad first. They must be on their way then," I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I knew they rang hollow. If my parents were coming, they would have arrived before Brooke, who lived hours away. Brooke's expression told me everything before she even spoke. "No, Meg, they're not coming. That's impossible. There must have been a misunderstanding. Or they couldn't get away from." "They got the call." Brooke cut me off, her voice gentle but firm. "They said they were too busy to come." The heart monitor beside my bed betrayed my physical reaction to her words, beeping faster as my pulse accelerated. "I don't believe you." Brooke hesitated, then held out her phone. "I'm sorry, Meg. I wish I didn't have to show you this." On the screen was a text exchange with our mother from earlier that day. "Mom, why is the hospital calling me about Megan?" Brooke, "She collapsed at work. They say exhaustion and severe panic attack. I'm driving down now." Mom, "She's always been dramatic. Probably just needs attention. Your father has an important client dinner tonight, and I'm hosting the library fundraising committee. We can't drop everything for one of her episodes." Brooke, "One of her episodes? Has this happened before?" Mom, "She's high-strung. Takes after your father's sister. We have it handled with her medication. Just tell her we'll call tomorrow." I stared at the exchange, reading and rereading it as though the words might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Something that matched the devoted parents I thought I had. "High-strung?" I whispered. "Episodes? What medication is she talking about?" I'd been prescribed anti-anxiety medication in college, but I'd never had a collapse before. "I don't know," Brooke said quietly. "But I drove 3 hours to get here as soon as they called me." The room seemed to tilt suddenly. The reality I'd constructed of being the cherished daughter, the successful one, the one they were proud of crumbling beneath me. The betrayal cut so deep that my body physically reacted. The heart monitor began blaring as my blood pressure spiked. A nurse rushed in, took one look at the monitors, and immediately administered something into my IV line. "Her pressure's too high," she said to Brooke. "She needs to rest. You can continue your conversation tomorrow." As the sedative flowed through my veins, the last thought I had before unconsciousness claimed me was a question that would haunt me. If my loving parents could so easily dismiss a medical emergency, what else had I been wrong about? 2 days later, the hospital discharged me with instructions for rest, stress reduction, and follow-up appointments with both my primary physician and a recommended therapist. The doctor's words still echoed in my head. "Your body is telling you something your mind hasn't been ready to hear." Brooke waited in the hospital parking lot, leaning against a navy blue Subaru I didn't recognize. The awkwardness between us was palpable. 8 years of silence creates a gulf not easily bridged by a hospital crisis. I can take you home, she offered. Unless you've called someone else? I hadn't. The thought of calling my colleagues felt humiliating, and my few friends outside work had gradually drifted away as I devoted more time to my career and pleasing my parents. The truth was stark. In my moment of need, the only person who showed up was the sister I had abandoned. Thanks, I said simply, sliding into her passenger seat. The drive to my apartment was mostly silent. Occasionally, Brooke would point out how the city had changed, or I would give a direction, but neither of us broached the subject of our parents or the years between us. Boston traffic gave us plenty of stops and starts to fill with uncomfortable silence. Nice place, Brooke commented as we pulled up to my brownstone in Back Bay. It was nice beyond what I could have afforded on my own salary. Our parents had covered the down payment as a graduation gift and still paid half the mortgage, a fact that suddenly felt less like generosity and more like a tether. As we approached my door, I fumbled with the keys, still slightly weak from my hospital stay. Before I could insert the key, the door swung open. My parents stood in my living room, looking perfectly put together as always. Mom in her cream cashmere sweater, Dad in his navy blazer with the gold buttons, their version of casual weekend wear. Sweetheart! Mom rushed forward, embracing me with the perfect amount of pressure to seem concerned without wrinkling her outfit. We've been so worried. Dad stood back, hands in pockets, nodding gravely. Glad to see you up and about. Their performance was flawless. Had I not seen the text exchange, I might have believed their concern was genuine. Then Mom's eyes drifted past me to where Brooke stood in the doorway, and her expression hardened momentarily before she recovered her perfect hostess smile. Brooke, what a surprise. Is it? Brooke's voice was calm but had an edge I'd never heard before. I would think the hospital calling to say your daughter collapsed would warrant some kind of family response. The hospital? Dad's brow furrowed in practiced confusion. We never received any call. As soon as Jennifer from your office called us yesterday, we came straight over, but you were already checked out. The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that for a moment, I almost believed it. Maybe there had been a miscommunication. Maybe the hospital had failed to reach them. That's strange, Brooke said, pulling out her phone. Because I have the text messages right here showing Mom knew exactly what happened. And I've spoken to the hospital administrator who confirmed they called both of you immediately after Megan was admitted. She turned the phone toward them, the damning messages displayed on the screen. Dad's face darkened to a dangerous shade of red. I recognized from childhood the harbinger of one of his controlled but terrifying explosions of anger. You've always had a talent for creating drama, he said to Brooke, voice low and tight, coming back after all these years just to stir up trouble. Typical. Mom placed a restraining hand on his arm, ever the mediator of appearances. There must be some misunderstanding. Richard. Perhaps they called when we were in that dead zone driving through the tunnel? She turned to me, eyes wide with manufactured innocence. Darling, you know we'd have come immediately if we'd known. We were just so relieved when your office said you were already recovering. The excuses might have worked before. I'd spent my entire life accepting their version of reality, contorting myself to fit into the story they wanted to tell. But something had broken loose in me when I collapsed on that office floor, some truth my body knew that my mind had been denying. Stop lying, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. You knew. You chose not to come because Dad had a client dinner and you had your fundraiser committee. The shock on their faces wasn't from being wrongly accused, it was from being challenged. In 26 years, I had never directly contradicted them. Megan, Mom's voice took on the patronizing tone she used when I'd been difficult as a child. I think these medications they have you on are affecting your judgment. You're not thinking clearly, sweetheart. I'm thinking clearly for the first time in years, I replied, moving past them into my own apartment. And I'd like you both to leave. Leave? We came all this way to help you. Dad's control was slipping, his carefully managed facade cracking. This is the thanks we get for everything we've done for you? For the career we helped you build? For this apartment? Is that what this has always been about? Making sure I know what I owe you? Making sure I never forget that every good thing in my life came from your generosity? Now you sound just like your sister, he spat, glaring at Brooke. Is this what you wanted? To turn her against us too? Megan is thinking for herself, Brooke said quietly. Maybe for the first time. We're only thinking of what's best for you, Mom interjected, trying to salvage the situation. Your lifestyle choices. The pressure you put on yourself, it's led to this collapse. We're worried about you, darling. The word lifestyle hung in the air, loaded with implications. My mother had always used it to refer to choices she disapproved of, like when our cousin came out as gay, or when Dad's colleague divorced to pursue a less lucrative but more fulfilling career. My lifestyle? I repeated. You mean the 60-hour work weeks at the firm Dad's friend runs? The apartment you helped choose? The men you approve of? Which part of my completely parent-approved life is causing me stress exactly? They exchanged that look I knew so well, the one that said I was being unreasonable, that they would discuss my behavior later when I wasn't around. We'll talk when you're feeling more yourself, Dad said with finality, moving toward the door. Clearly you need more rest. We'll reconsider our support if this is the new attitude you're adopting. The threat would have terrified me a week ago. Now it just confirmed what I was beginning to understand about the true nature of their support. After they left, slamming the door with just enough force to express displeasure without seeming completely undignified, Brooke and I stood in silence. Does that happen often? She finally asked. Which part? The threats. The gaslighting. The rewriting of reality. I sank onto my couch, suddenly exhausted again. I don't know. I never noticed it before. Or maybe I just never called it what it was. Brooke sat beside me, careful to maintain some distance. It took me years of therapy to recognize their patterns, to understand that what happened to us wasn't normal. What did happen to us? I asked, feeling like I was waking from a long, confusing dream. That, she said, is going to take a lot longer than one afternoon to unpack. She hesitated, then added, but I'm willing to help if you want me to. It was a tentative olive branch, extended across 8 years of silence and hurt. And for the first time in my adult life, I made a decision without calculating how my parents would react to it. I'd like that, I said. 1 week of medical leave wasn't nearly enough, but I couldn't afford more time away financially or politically. The Taylor family motto might as well have been never show weakness, and I had internalized it completely. So Monday morning found me back at Crawford & Associates Marketing, dressed impeccably in a charcoal pencil skirt and burgundy blouse that concealed how much weight I'd lost in the hospital. The first sign something was wrong came when I couldn't access my office. My keycard beeped red instead of green, an electronic rejection that brought curious glances from early arriving colleagues. Oh, Megan, Gloria from reception called out with exaggerated sympathy. Didn't they tell you? You've been moved to the bullpen. The bullpen was our open office space where junior associates and interns sat at clustered desks without privacy or status. My private office, earned through 3 promotions in 5 years, had apparently vanished during my absence. There must be some mistake, I said, trying to keep my voice professional despite the humiliation burning through me. No mistake, came a voice behind me. Brad Parker, 2 years my junior and previously my subordinate, stood there with an expression of rehearsed concern. Given your situation, upper management thought it best to redistribute the workload. I'll be handling your accounts for now. Brad had started 6 months after me, but had risen quickly thanks to his talent for taking credit for others' ideas and his friendship with the CEO's son. We'd maintained a cordial professional relationship, but I'd never trusted his too wide smile. And who exactly is upper management? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Mr. Crawford made the decision personally. Brad lowered his voice to a theatrical whisper. After your father called him. Of course, the betrayal hit like a physical blow. William Crawford was my father's college roommate, the reason I'd been hired straight out of school. My father had called him not to protect me, but to demote me. I spent that morning in a daze, setting up at a desk between a nervous intern and the office refrigerator. My former team members avoided eye contact, treating me like I carried some contagious disease called failure. By lunch, the rumors had solidified. Megan Taylor had suffered a breakdown and couldn't handle the pressure anymore. I waited until my lunch break to call my father, stepping outside to the courtyard where smokers gathered despite the November chill. Dad, I said when he answered, skipping pleasantries. Did you tell William to demote me? A slight pause. Then his businessman voiced the one he used for difficult negotiations. I suggested that your workload be adjusted given your condition. My condition? Megan, you collapsed in the middle of the office. Clearly, you couldn't handle the responsibilities of your position. I had a panic attack, Dad. The doctor said it was from exhaustion and chronic stress, things that could be managed with proper self-care and boundaries. Exactly my point. You've never been good at setting boundaries or taking care of yourself. You push too hard, always have. You need structure and supervision. The casual dismissal of my capabilities after years of meeting every standard he'd set was breathtaking in its hypocrisy. I've consistently exceeded targets for 5 years. I've brought in more new clients than any other associate. I was being considered for junior partner next year. And look where it got you in the hospital. This is for your own good, Megan. William agrees with me. Of course he did. William Crawford had never once contradicted my father in the 20-plus years I'd known him. Their friendship operated on clear hierarchies, just like our family. Did you know they put me in the bullpen? That Brad Parker is now supervising me? I couldn't keep the hurt from my voice. Brad has a good head for business. You could learn from him. He doesn't let emotions cloud his judgment. Translation: Brad was a man, and men didn't have episodes. The sexism was so blatant, it would have been laughable if it weren't destroying my career. I ended the call before my father could hear the sob building in my throat. I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. The rest of that week was an exercise in humiliation. Brad assigned me entry-level tasks that wasted my expertise. Colleagues who'd once sought my advice now spoke to me slowly, as though I might shatter at any moment. Twice, I overheard whispers that followed me into the break room. Complete nervous breakdown. Her parents had to be called. Always seemed so perfect, but you know those types. By Thursday, I found myself hiding in the bathroom during lunch, breathing through panic that threatened to overwhelm me again. My phone buzzed with a text from Brooke, checking in. How's work? I hesitated, then typed the truth. Nightmare. Dad had me demoted. Everyone's treating me like I'm unstable. Her response came quickly. You don't have to stay there. You're brilliant at what you do. Any agency would be lucky to have you. The thought of leaving Crawford and Associates had never seriously occurred to me. It was part of the Taylor family plan, the job Dad secured, the place where I would rise to partner, following the path he had charted from the day I declared my marketing major. It's not that simple, I replied. My whole career is here. Your whole cage is there, Brooke countered. There's a difference. Later that afternoon, I overheard a conversation that confirmed my worst suspicions. Passing by the executive conference room, I recognized the voices of William Crawford and his son Jason discussing an upcoming client meeting. Should we include Megan in the Phillips presentation? Jason asked. She did develop most of the campaign. Better not, William replied. Richard says she's still fragile. Apparently, there's a family history of mental instability on Jessica's side. Richard's been managing it for years, but sometimes these things reach a breaking point. That explains a lot, Jason agreed. She always seemed a bit intense. Too perfect, you know? Like she was wound too tight. Exactly. Richard says they've had her medicated since college, but these episodes still happen. Better to keep her on the simple accounts for now. Less pressure. I stumbled away from the door, nauseated by the casual discussion of my supposed condition information my father had apparently been spreading through his social circle. The family I had sacrificed everything to please had been systematically undermining me while pretending to support me. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. The woman looking back seemed like a stranger, pale, with dark circles under her eyes and a perpetual crease between her brows, from years of trying to anticipate others' expectations. My phone buzzed again with another text from Brooke. Coming to the city this weekend. Dinner tomorrow? I'll pick you up at 7. As I typed yes, my hands trembled not with anxiety this time, but with something that felt dangerously like rage. The third Sunday of every month had been Taylor family dinner for as long as I could remember. It was non-negotiable, a sacred tradition where attendance was mandatory and performance was evaluated. In the wake of everything that had happened, I considered canceling, but some deeply ingrained fear of disappointing my parents prevented me from taking that step. What I did do, however, was invite Brooke as my plus one, a small act of rebellion that gave me both anxiety and strange satisfaction. Are you sure? Brooke asked when I extended the invitation on Friday night. Over Thai food in my apartment. You know they'll make it awful for both of us. I'm sure, I said, surprised by my own determination. I'm tired of pretending you don't exist to make them comfortable. Besides, I need backup. So at precisely 6 p.m. on Sunday, Brooke and I arrived at our parents' Beacon Hill home, the perfect federal-style townhouse that had been featured in Boston Home magazine twice for its timeless elegance. I used my key to let us in, calling out, "Mom? Dad? We're here." The deliberate use of "we didn't go unnoticed." Mom appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a designer tea towel that had never actually dried a dish. Her smile froze when she saw Brooke. "Megan, darling." And Brooke. What a surprise. I mentioned I was bringing someone. I reminded her. I had texted her that morning, receiving only a terse fine in response. "Yes, of course," Mom recovered quickly. "How nice. Your father's in his study on a call. He'll be out shortly. And Diane is joining us tonight." Diane Thompson was my mother's oldest friend and fellow charity board member, a widow who had practically lived at our house since her husband died 5 years ago. She was like a shadow of my mother, echoing her opinions, validating her choices, and reinforcing her worldview. "Great," Brooke muttered under her breath, following me into the formal living room where we perched awkwardly on identical cream-colored sofas that had never known the comfort of sprawling bodies or Netflix binges. Dad emerged 15 minutes later, his momentary shock at seeing Brooke quickly masked by his businessman's composure. "Brooke, this is unexpected. I invited her," I said, finding my voice. "It's family dinner, after all." The look that passed between my parents communicated volumes without a word being spoken, a skill they had perfected over decades of marriage. Dinner proceeded with excruciating politeness. Mom and Diane carried most of the conversation, discussing people from their social circle I barely knew, and charity events I had no interest in. Dad asked perfunctory questions about my new role at work, carefully framed to suggest it was a positive development rather than a humiliating demotion. Brooke was largely ignored, addressed only when direct questions couldn't be avoided. She answered with minimal information, clearly familiar with the strategy of giving them as little ammunition as possible. As Mom and Diane cleared the main course dishes, I offered to help, following them into the kitchen while Brooke endured Dad's thinly veiled interrogation about her life choices. In the kitchen, I reached for plates to help serve dessert when I overheard my mother's hushed voice from the pantry where she and Diane had retreated. Don't know what she was thinking, bringing her here after all this time. "The hospital incident clearly affected her judgment," Diane replied. "Have you adjusted her medication yet?" Richard increased the dosage in her Sunday cocktail, but it takes time to build in her system. "You've been managing it for so long. Ever since Princeton, right?" "Before that. Actually, the anxiety started in high school, but we kept it under control with the therapist. The medication became necessary in college when she started questioning everything, just like Brooke had, the same rebellious streak. We couldn't risk losing both of them. At least it's kept her manageable all these years, so much more compliant than Brooke ever was. That's because Brooke always refused to take anything, called it chemical manipulation, and flushed the pills. But Megan never knew what was in her drinks. Richard has a doctor friend who helped formulate something she can't taste. Just enough to keep the edges smooth, you know? The glass bowl I was holding slipped from my fingers, shattering on the tile floor. Mom and Diane emerged from the pantry, startled by the noise and then alarmed by my expression. "Megan, be careful. That was Waterford Crystal," Mom scolded automatically, then registered my face. "Darling, are you feeling all right? You're pale. How long have you been drugging me?" The words came out in a horrified whisper. Mom's face went through a rapid series of expressions: shock, guilt, and then a composed denial. "Don't be dramatic. Your father and I have only ever done what's best for your health." "My health?" My voice rose. "You've been putting anxiety medication in my drinks without my knowledge or consent for years." "Lower your voice," Mom hissed, glancing toward the dining room. "Diane, would you check on Richard and our other guest?" Diane slipped out, leaving me facing my mother across the broken crystal between us. You needed help, Megan. You were becoming difficult, questioning everything just like Brooke. We couldn't let you throw away your future on some rebellious phase. It wasn't a phase. It was me, the real me, trying to make my own choices. And look where your sister's choices got her, Mom countered. No stability, no proper career. Is that what you wanted? Before I could answer, the kitchen door swung open. Brooke stood there, my father and Diane behind her. What's going on? Dad demanded. We can hear you shouting from the dining room. They've been drugging me, I said to Brooke, my voice shaking. For years. Putting anxiety medication in my drinks without telling me. Instead of shock, Brooke's face showed grim confirmation. They did the same to me. That's part of why I left. I caught Mom crushing pills into my orange juice when I was 16. This is ridiculous, Dad interjected. We've provided you both with proper medical care for anxiety issues that run in the family. Medical care involves informed consent. Brooke shot back. Not secretly medicating your children to make them more compliant. We did what any responsible parents would do, Mom insisted, her voice taking on the wounded tone she used when her parenting was questioned. You both inherited my mother's anxiety disorder. We were protecting you. Protecting us? I laughed bitterly. You were controlling us, making us easier to manage, keeping us dependent on you so we'd never question your authority. Megan, you're being hysterical, Dad said dismissively. This just proves our point about your condition. My condition is that I've spent my entire adult life sedated, without my knowledge, I shot back. No wonder I've been living like a robot, doing everything you wanted without question. I wasn't making choices, I was following a chemical script you wrote for me. The confrontation escalated from there, years of unspoken resentments exploding to the surface. Mom cried strategic tears that never quite fell, preserving her makeup. Dad threatened to cut off financial support if I continued with this destructive path. Brooke and I stood united for the first time in nearly a decade, refusing to back down. When Dad finally shouted, "Either accept that we know what's best for you, or you'll get no more help from us," I found myself saying words I never thought I'd have the courage to speak. Keep your help. I'd rather struggle on my own than live as your puppet for another day. We left as Diane comforted my shocked parents, stumbling out into the crisp autumn evening. In the driveway, the reality of what I'd done hit me all at once. I doubled over, violently sick on my mother's carefully tended ornamental grasses. Purging more than just dinner, it felt like ejecting years of suppressed truth. Brooke held my hair back silently, then helped me to her car. What have I done? I whispered as we drove away from the only support system I'd ever known. Something brave, she answered simply. Something real. The retaliation came swiftly. By Monday morning, my bank card was declined at Starbucks. A quick check of my accounts revealed they had been frozen, both the personal account and the joint one I shared with my parents for emergencies. At work, I received an email from HR requesting a meeting. The department head, a nervous woman named Patricia who avoided eye contact, informed me that the company had concerns about my ability to fulfill my duties. We think it would be best if you took a medical leave of absence, she said, sliding paperwork across her desk. Effective immediately. On whose authority? I asked, already knowing the answer. The decision comes from the top, she replied vaguely. Mr. Crawford feels it would be in everyone's best interest. Translation. My father had called in another favor, this time to remove me from the workplace entirely. The form Patricia wanted me to sign would place me on unpaid leave for 3 months, long enough to completely derail my career and deplete my savings. I left without signing anything, telling Patricia I needed to review the documents with my attorney. The bluff worked. She couldn't force me out the door immediately, but worse news awaited at my apartment. A formal letter had been delivered by courier, an eviction notice giving me 30 days to vacate. Apparently, the apartment I thought was partially mine was fully in my parents' names. They had never added me to the deed as promised, despite my contributing to the mortgage for years. I sat on my kitchen floor, not mine, I realized. Never truly mine, and called Brooke in a panic. They've cut me off completely, I explained after detailing the frozen accounts, the work sabotage, and the eviction. I have maybe $2,000 in cash, and a maxed out credit card they can't touch. What am I going to do? First, breathe, Brooke said calmly. This is what they do, create crisis to force compliance. They did the same to me, though on a smaller scale since I had less to lose. But you'll get through this. How? I have nowhere to go, no access to money, and I'm about to lose my job. You have somewhere to go, she said firmly. My guest room. It's yours for as long as you need it. The offer was generous, but pride made me hesitate. Brooke, I can't. After how I abandoned you, stop. We were both victims of their manipulation. I've had 8 years and a lot of therapy to understand that. Now it's your turn to break free. That afternoon, I met with a financial advisor Brooke recommended a no-nonsense woman named Valerie, who specialized in helping people establish financial independence after controlling relationships. Unfortunately, what you're describing is common, Valerie said after hearing my situation. Financial control is one of the most effective forms of manipulation because it creates immediate crisis and dependency. She helped me open new accounts at a bank my parents had no relationship with, transfer my direct deposits, and begin the process of establishing credit solely in my name. What about the apartment? I asked. If your name isn't on the deed, there's little you can do legally, she admitted. But we should look into the trust fund your grandmother established for you. You mentioned that earlier? My grandmother had indeed set up modest trust funds for both Brooke and me when we were born. I'd rarely thought about mine since my parents had always managed it, telling me it was being saved for something important like a house down payment they approved of. Let's request the trust documentation, Valerie suggested. I have concerns about how it's been managed. 2 days later, we had our answer. The trust, which should have been worth over $200,000 by now, showed a balance of just $43,000. Regular withdrawals had been made over the years for educational expenses and medical necessities, neither of which matched my actual education costs, covered by scholarships and loans, or medical bills covered by insurance. They've been skimming from it for years, Valerie explained, showing me the pattern of withdrawals, using your trust to fund their lifestyle while keeping you financially dependent on their generosity. The revelation was the final straw. In Valerie's office, surrounded by spreadsheets documenting years of calculated financial manipulation, I broke down completely. Not the controlled weeping my mother would have deemed appropriate, but ugly, guttural sobs that came from someplace deep and primal. I've been such a fool, I gasped between sobs. They never loved me, they owned me, and I let them. I chose them over my sister, over my own happiness, over everything. And it was all a lie. Valerie waited patiently until the storm passed, then handed me tissues and a glass of water. What you're feeling is normal, she said. Financial abuse leaves invisible scars, but they're real. The good news is, we can fix the practical problems. You've already taken the hardest step by recognizing what was happening. Over the next few weeks, I moved into Brooke's guest room in her modest but warmly decorated apartment in Somerville. We established an awkward but gradually warming routine of shared meals and cautious conversations. The weight of our 8-year estrangement couldn't be erased overnight, but each day brought small moments of reconnection, discovering we still finished each other's sentences, or realizing we had independently developed the same coffee preferences. Meanwhile, my parents escalated their pressure. They left voicemails alternating between concern, "We're worried sick about you, darling," and veiled threats. You're making choices that will have permanent consequences for your future. Flying monkeys from their social circle reached out family friends, expressing concern about my erratic behavior and offering to help mediate with my parents. I changed my number, deactivated my social media accounts, and focused on rebuilding from scratch. The practical challenges were daunting, but nowhere near as difficult as confronting the psychological conditioning that had shaped my entire life. It's like I'm meeting myself for the first time, I told Brooke one evening over takeout containers at her kitchen table. I don't even know what I actually like or want. Everything was always chosen for me, or I chose what I knew they would approve of. That feeling lasts a while, she said with the wisdom of experience. But eventually, you start discovering the real you underneath all their programming. And she's pretty amazing. I wished I shared her confidence. The woman I saw in the mirror each morning looked lost, with shadows under her eyes and an expression of perpetual uncertainty. But at least she was finally truly mine. 3 weeks into my stay with Brooke, a knock at the door interrupted our Saturday morning coffee ritual. Brooke peered through the peephole, then turned to me with an expression of surprised delight. "It's Grandma Elaine." The woman who entered was not the frail, difficult grandmother my parents had occasionally described. At 74, Elaine Montgomery stood straight-backed and elegant in a simple blue dress, her silver hair cut in a stylish bob. Her eyes, the same hazel as mine and Brooke's, were sharp and alert behind modern glasses. "Megan," she said, opening her arms. At last, I hesitated only briefly before stepping into her embrace, surprised by how familiar she felt despite our limited contact over the years. She smelled of gardenia, perfume, and mint tea, comforting scents that triggered childhood memories I'd almost forgotten. "I would have come sooner," she explained as we settled in Brooke's living room, "but I wanted to give you time to adjust to everything." "Brooke said the revelation about your parents has been quite traumatic." "That's putting it mildly," I admitted. "I feel like my entire life has been a lie." Grandma Elaine nodded, her expression somber. "Not your entire life, but certainly much of what you were told about your family. Your parents, particularly your mother, my daughter, have a long history of controlling behavior and isolation tactics." She opened a large tote bag she'd brought with her, removing a worn leather photo album. "This is why I came today. I think it's time you knew the truth about your family." The album contained photos I'd never seen before: family gatherings, holiday celebrations, birthdays. What shocked me was that I was in many of them as a young child, surrounded by relatives I barely recognized. "These are your aunts, uncles, cousins," Grandma explained, pointing to faces in the images. "Your mother's siblings and their families. This was at the lake house for your 5th birthday." "I don't remember any of this," I said, studying a photo of myself, maybe 4 years old, being swung between two smiling adults I couldn't name. "Your parents began isolating the family when you were very young, but it became complete when you were about 6. Your mother claimed everyone was a bad influence or undermined her parenting. One by one, she cut ties with everyone who questioned their methods." Brooke, who had seen these photos before during her own reconnection with Grandma, sat beside me as I turned pages documenting a family life I had no memory of. "What about all those years afterward? Didn't anyone try to reach us?" I asked, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. In answer, Grandma reached into her bag again and withdrew a shoebox tied with ribbon. Inside were dozens of birthday cards, holiday greetings, and notes addressed to both Brooke and me, spanning years. "We all tried. Your parents intercepted everything. When phone calls went unanswered, we sent cards and letters. When those got no response, we tried to visit. Your parents always had excuses. You were too busy with school activities or away on trips. Eventually, they moved without providing a forwarding address to family. I picked up a card at random, a birthday wish for my 16th birthday from an Aunt Sarah I barely remembered. Inside was a note expressing love and a $20 bill that had never reached me. Mom always said her family was distant and difficult," Brooke said quietly, "that they disapproved of her choices and didn't want contact." "On the contrary," Grandma replied. "We disapproved of how they isolated you girls, how they played you against each other, how they used conditional love as a weapon. But we never stopped trying to reach you." As we spent the day going through photos and letters, a different family history emerged than the one I'd been taught. My parents weren't the pillars of stability protecting us from a chaotic extended family. They were the architects of an elaborate system designed to ensure complete control, eliminating anyone who might offer us alternative perspectives or unconditional support. "Your mother learned these tactics from her father," Grandma explained. "My late husband was similarly controlling. I stayed too long, made excuses for his behavior, and by the time I left him, the damage to Jessica was done. She recreated his patterns in her own marriage and parenting. Why didn't you try harder to stop it?" I couldn't help asking, a lifetime of lost connections weighing on my heart. Grandma's eyes filled with tears, the first sign of vulnerability she'd shown. "I did try. When you were 12, I filed for grandparents' rights after they cut off all contact. Your father's legal connections ensured the case never made it to court. When that failed, I hired a private investigator to keep track of you girls, which is how I was able to reach Brooke when she left home. And how I found you after the hospital," Brooke added. "I failed you both in many ways," Grandma acknowledged. First, by exposing your mother to that environment as a child. Then, by not fighting harder when it was clear she was perpetuating the cycle. I can't change the past, but I hope we can build something better for the future. Later that evening, after Grandma had gone to her hotel with plans to return the next day, Brooke brought out an old laptop. "There's one more thing you should see," she said, opening a video file. "Grandma gave me these old home movies a few years ago. I think you need to see who we were before they rewrote our history." The video showed Brooke and me as young children, perhaps 5 and 7, playing in a backyard sprinkler, shrieking with laughter as we chased each other through the water. What struck me most was how physically affectionate we were hugging, holding hands, falling into giggling heaps together. The genuine joy between us was palpable, a stark contrast to the strained politeness that had characterized our interactions in later childhood. "We were really close, weren't we?" I whispered, watching our younger selves with a strange mixture of recognition and alienation. "Best friends," Brooke confirmed, "until they systematically drove us apart. The constant comparison, the unequal treatment, positioning us as rivals instead of allies, it was all deliberate, Meg. They knew together we might question them, might support each other. Separated, we were easier to control." Watching these ghosts of our former selves, I felt an anger deeper than anything I'd experienced before. Not the reactive rage of recent betrayals, but a profound, smoldering fury at everything that had been stolen from us. Years of potential closeness, support, and love deliberately sabotaged to maintain parental control. "I want it all back," I said, my voice hardening with determination. "Not just the trust fund money they stole, but everything, our relationship, our extended family, our sense of self. I want to reclaim every single thing they took from us." Brooke reached for my hand, squeezing it in wordless understanding. "We start tomorrow," I continued. "With Grandma's help, we're going to document everything, build our case, and confront them not just for an emotional showdown, but for real accountability." That night, I slept better than I had in years. Despite the pain of these revelations, there was something powerfully healing about finally naming the truth, about transforming from victim to advocate for myself and the sister I had almost lost forever. Over the next 2 weeks, Grandma, Elaine, Brooke, and I built our case methodically. Grandma introduced us to Charles Weston, an attorney who had helped her during her divorce and had a particular interest in cases involving financial exploitation and psychological abuse. "What your parents have done crosses several legal lines," Charles explained during our first meeting, reviewing the documents we had gathered. "Financial exploitation, medical fraud, potentially even identity theft given the access they maintain to your accounts without consent. And the misappropriation of trust fund assets is clear-cut. Our strategy wasn't about revenge, though the hurt and anger remained powerful motivators. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully ours and establishing boundaries that even our parents' considerable social and financial power couldn't breach. I insisted on meeting at their house, the symbolic heart of their control, rather than in Charles's office. After some debate, he agreed, recognizing the psychological importance of confronting them on their own territory. "Just be prepared," Brooke warned as we drove to Beacon Hill on a crisp Saturday morning, Charles following in his own car with Grandma. "They'll have anticipated this and will have countermeasures ready. They always do." How right she was. When we arrived at the impeccably maintained townhouse, we found not just our parents waiting, but a gathering of family, friends, and social connections. Diane, of course, along with 2 couples from their country club, my father's business associate, William Crawford, and Dr. Philip Harmon, a psychiatrist who had occasionally been present at family gatherings over the years. It was immediately clear what was happening. They had staged an intervention, positioning themselves as concerned loved ones while painting me as unstable and delusional. "Megan, darling," Mom stepped forward with rehearsed concern, ignoring Brooke, Grandma, and Charles completely. "We're so relieved you've come. We've been desperately worried about you." "I can see that," I replied, taking in the carefully arranged scene, the tissues placed strategically on side tables, the water pitchers and glasses, the somber expressions of their assembled allies. "Planning an intervention, I presume? How convenient that you gathered everyone before knowing I was coming." "Your behavior has been concerning," Dad interjected, maintaining his position of paternal authority. These sudden accusations, cutting off communication, abandoning your job and apartment. Dr. Harmon thinks, Dr. Harmon, Charles interrupted smoothly, is ethically prohibited from offering a diagnosis of someone who is not his patient, particularly in this informal setting. Attempting to do so could be reported to the medical board as an ethics violation. The psychiatrist shifted uncomfortably, clearly not expecting a legal presence. Who is this? Dad demanded, his composure slipping slightly as he gestured to Charles. Charles Weston, attorney, he introduced himself, offering a business card. I represent Megan and Brooke Taylor in this matter, along with their grandmother, Elaine Montgomery. Mom's face hardened at the mention of her mother. Mother. I should have known you'd be behind this. Still interfering after all these years. Still trying to protect my granddaughters, Grandma corrected firmly. Something I should have done more effectively long ago. The assembled intervention participants exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly not having been briefed on this turn of events. Perhaps, Charles suggested, pointedly, this discussion would be better conducted with just immediate family present. Dad attempted to regain control of the situation. These are our closest friends, practically family. Anything you need to say can be said in front of them. It was a calculated move surrounding themselves with allies, creating witnesses who would support their version of events. But it backfired spectacularly. Perfect, I said, drawing strength from Brooke's presence beside me. Then they can all hear exactly what you've done. Over the next hour, we methodically presented our evidence financial records, showing the systematic draining of my trust fund, medical documentation regarding the unauthorized medication, correspondence with extended family that had been intercepted, and statements from colleagues at Crawford and Associates, detailing my father's interference with my career. As the full picture emerged, the reactions from their assembled friends ranged from shock to discomfort to outright distress. Diane maintained unwavering support of my mother, but William Crawford looked increasingly disturbed, particularly when confronted with evidence that he had participated in discriminatory workplace practices based on false medical information. Richard, he said slowly, you told me Megan had been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder that affected her work performance, that her doctors recommended reducing her responsibilities. She has been unstable since college, Dad insisted. We've been managing her condition without her knowledge or consent, Charles interjected, by secretly administering prescription medication, which constitutes assault under Massachusetts law. That's absurd. We're her parents. She's 26 years old, Richard, Grandma pointed out sharply. Not a minor. You have no legal right to make medical decisions for her, particularly without her knowledge. The carefully constructed narrative my parents had maintained for years was unraveling in real time, their supporters witnessing the collapse of the perfect family image. My father, sensing the shift in the room, attempted his final defensive maneuver attack. This is all very convenient timing, he said, voice hard with controlled rage. Just as Megan's career was advancing, just as she was building independence, suddenly Brooke reappears after abandoning the family for years, filling her head with these delusions. And now you're both after money. That's what this is really about, isn't it? It was the moment I had been waiting for the opportunity to speak my truth without flinching, without the chemical buffer they had maintained for years to keep me compliant. We're after accountability, I said clearly. The trust fund money you stole from me? That's just the beginning. You systematically isolated us from family, medicated me without consent, sabotaged my career when I began showing independence, and deliberately drove a wedge between Brooke and me to prevent us from supporting each other. I stepped closer, meeting his gaze directly. You didn't raise daughters, Dad. You created possessions, dolls you could dress up and position however you wanted. The perfect family was never about our happiness or well-being. It was about your control and your image. Mom had begun crying, her perfectly applied makeup remaining intact despite the tears, a skill perfected through years of strategic emotional displays. We only wanted what was best for you, she insisted. Everything we did was out of love. That's not love, Brooke said quietly. Love doesn't require drugging someone to make them compliant. Love doesn't isolate. Love doesn't manipulate and control. What you feel might be attachment or possession, but it's not love. Several of the intervention participants had already begun making discreet exits, muttering excuses about prior commitments. William Crawford approached me directly. "Megan, I had no idea," Richard assured me. He trailed off, seeming to realize there was no acceptable completion to that sentence. "Your position at the firm is still yours if you want it. No demotion. And I'll need to review how Brad has been handling your accounts in your absence." It was a small victory, but I no longer needed it. "Thank you, but I'll be pursuing other opportunities," I told him. "Ones not connected to my father's influence." As the room emptied of their supporters, my parents' facade finally cracked completely. Dad's controlled businessman persona gave way to raw fury. "You'll regret this," he threatened, pointing at me with a shaking finger. "You think you can build a life without our support, without our connections? You'll come crawling back within a month, and there will be conditions when you do." 8 weeks earlier, those words would have terrified me into immediate compliance. Now, standing with my sister and grandmother, backed by legal counsel and the strength of hard-won clarity, I felt only pity for the desperate man before me. "The only thing I regret," I told him calmly, "is not seeing who you really are sooner. But I see you clearly now, and I'm no longer afraid." We left them in their perfect house with its perfect furnishings, surrounded by the hollow trappings of the image they had sacrificed everything meaningful to maintain. As we walked down the steps of the townhouse, I felt a weight lifting not completely gone, but significantly lightened. The cool autumn air felt like freedom on my face. 6 months later, I stood in my new apartment in Cambridge, unpacking the last of my books. It wasn't as spacious or luxurious as the Back Bay place my parents had controlled, but every inch of it was mine paid for with my salary from the boutique marketing firm where I had found a position that valued my creativity rather than my family connections. The legal battle with my parents had been resolved more quickly than anticipated. Faced with the evidence Charles had compiled and the potential for public exposure through court proceedings, they had agreed to a settlement that restored my trust fund and provided compensation for the financial losses I had suffered due to their interference. Brooke leaned in the doorway, watching me arrange my small but growing collection of books that reflected my actual interests rather than what had looked impressive on my parents' approved reading list. "You know," she observed, "I think this is the first time I've seen you truly relaxed since we were kids." I considered this as I placed a well-worn copy of a fantasy novel my parents would have dismissed as childish on my shelf. "Therapy helps," I acknowledged. "So does not being secretly medicated." Weekly sessions with Dr. Martinez, a trauma-informed therapist specializing in family systems, had become the cornerstone of my recovery. Learning to distinguish between my authentic feelings and the conditioned responses installed by years of manipulation was ongoing work, often painful but deeply liberating. "Speaking of which," Brooke said, "Grandma called. Sunday dinner at her place is still on. She's making that lasagna you like." The weekly dinners with Grandma Elaine had become a healing ritual, an opportunity to rebuild our sense of family on healthier terms. She had moved from Maine to a comfortable apartment in Medford to be closer to us, and her home had become a gathering place, not just for Brooke and me, but for the extended family members we were gradually getting to know. Aunt Sarah and Uncle Jim are bringing their kids, I remembered. The cousins we never got to grow up with. "Better late than never," Brooke said with a slight smile. "Though I still can't believe how much Matthew looks like you. Those Montgomery genes are strong." Reconnecting with extended family had been one of the most surprisingly healing aspects of the past months. Discovering relatives who shared not only our physical features, but our interests and personality traits had helped repair some of the identity fragmentation that had resulted from our parents' isolation tactics. My phone buzzed with a text from Jeremy, a graphic designer I had met through work and had been dating for the past 2 months. Unlike the carefully vetted men my parents had approved of, all from good families with the right credentials and connections, Jeremy was creative, occasionally irreverent, and completely his own person. "He's still coming to help with the furniture assembly?" Brooke asked, noticing my smile. "Yeah, he'll be here in an hour. Says he's bringing tools and Thai food." "I like him," Brooke declared. "He sees you, not some idealized version or reflection of himself." Learning to date authentically had been another challenge. Years of choosing partners based on my parents' approval criteria had left me with little understanding of my own preferences or needs in relationships. Jeremy was patient with my occasional uncertainty, understanding when I explained that I was still discovering who I really was. "Did you talk to Mom and Dad this week?" Brooke asked carefully. Knowing it remained a sensitive subject, our parents had made several attempts at reconciliation over the past months, though always on their terms and without full accountability. They sent birthday cards, left voicemails suggesting family counseling, with their chosen therapist, of course, and once even appeared unannounced at my workplace with a housewarming gift. "Dad called yesterday," I admitted. Same as always, half apology, half suggestion that I'm overreacting. He mentioned they're planning a trip to Europe next month and offered to have me join them. And I told him I have work commitments and plans with friends. Setting boundaries remained difficult but essential. Each interaction was an opportunity to practice, saying no without guilt, to prioritize my needs without apology. The hardest part of recovery hadn't been the practical challenges of rebuilding my career or financial independence. It had been learning to trust my own perceptions and decisions after a lifetime of having them undermined. Some days were still difficult moments of doubt when the old conditioning resurfaced. Times when the ingrained fear of disapproval made me hesitate before making even simple choices. "You know what I was thinking about this morning?" I said, sitting beside Brooke on my new couch, a comfortable, slightly shabby piece I had chosen solely because I loved it. That day, I collapsed at work. At the time, it felt like the worst thing that could have happened. Now, I realize it was the best. How so? If I hadn't collapsed, they might have kept me controlled and medicated for years more. I might never have reconnected with you or Grandma. I'd still be living someone else's version of my life. Brooke nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes breaking is the only way forward. Later that evening, after furniture had been assembled and Thai food consumed, Jeremy headed home with plans to return the next day for a movie marathon. Brooke and I found ourselves on the small balcony of my new apartment, looking through old family photos Grandma had shared, reclaiming pieces of our shared history one image at a time. "Remember this?" Brooke pointed to a faded Polaroid of us as small children, faces painted like butterflies, arms wrapped around each other. "Grandma says this was from a family reunion when you were 6 and I was 4. Right before they started cutting everyone off." I studied our innocent faces, struck by the open joy reflected there. We deserved better than what they gave us. "We did," Brooke agreed, "but we're building better now. That's what matters." As the evening light faded over Cambridge, I felt a sense of peace that once would have seemed impossible. The journey of recovery wasn't complete. Perhaps it never would be entirely, but for the first time, I was living authentically, making choices based on my own values rather than fear of disapproval. Sometimes you have to completely fall apart to discover who you truly are, beyond the pieces others arranged for their convenience. My collapse hadn't been a breakdown so much as a breakthrough, the first step toward reclaiming my life and rebuilding connections that manipulation and control had nearly destroyed forever. If you've ever felt controlled by the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally, know that freedom is possible. It's a journey that requires courage, support, and patience with yourself as you relearn how to trust your own voice. I'd love to hear your stories of breaking free and rebuilding. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who couldn't respect your autonomy? Drop your experiences in the comments. Like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in their struggle. Thank you for witnessing my journey. And remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from those who only love the version of you they created.